All right. Well, it's a wonderful joy to be with you this morning and continue this series. This is a very important topic and applicable to everybody in our family and in our lives. The topic this morning that I'm going to share with all of you is solving conflicts with wisdom and respect. Do I hear an amen? I won't hear you, but go ahead and say amen. We need this, don't we? I'm going to share with you a very powerful, practical, and useful way to solve most of our conflicts without escalating them, without freezing, without getting afraid of the conflict. But first, I'd like to just share a little bit about what conflicts are. And for the most part, our problems that we have with each other are because we're different. We're all different. We are not clones of each other. We are all made in the image of God, yes, but we're all very different, like flowers of the field. We're all very different. And so these differences, I think this way, you think that way. I feel this way about this, you feel this way about that. Those differences that we all have are the vast majority of the conflicts that we end up having with each other. Now, of course, there are some conflicts due to pathology or addiction or heavy duty issues, and I'm not going to address those. I'm going to address, because they really need to be treated for what they are, true important issues. But the conflicts I want to help you resolve in your families and with all of the people in your life through this powerful UVA that I'm going to be teaching you is for the vast majority of our conflicts. And so I wanted just to say that so that we're aware of that I'm going to be screen sharing right now with you a PowerPoint so that we can learn how to kind of step by step go through this process with you. And for those who aren't able to be with us today, please encourage them to go ahead and come in later and listen to the talk and learn how to do that. So I'm going to start off with this first one, which is as I mentioned, solving conflicts with wisdom and respect. We all, I think, deeply want to solve conflicts, but we don't always do it very good. We have some skills, but we don't have other skills. We try to stay respectful, but then we lose our cool and maybe we punch below the belt. So this matrix that I'm going to teach you, this this approach of solving conflicts, is just beautiful. It's something you can use between each other and your family. And so let's get going. Before we jump into the UVA, I want to say a little bit about how do we handle criticism. Sooner or later, we're all going to be criticized by somebody. Somebody's going to expect us to do something that we didn't do, or maybe they didn't articulate what they wanted us to do, and there was a breakdown in communication. Whatever reason, sooner or later, we're all going to either criticize the other or we're going to be criticized. And so it's very important to not immediately get defensive and start criticizing the other. So I call it, we need to disarm criticism. And how do we disarm criticism? Well, first of all, when you are criticized, and you will be criticized, just wait, it's going to happen sooner or later. The very first thing to do, instead of getting caught up in your own defensiveness, is ask a simple question. Ask, what was your expectation? Because you can bet your bottom dollar that somebody's mad at you because they expected something that you didn't deliver. Or maybe you did do something, but it wasn't quite what they wanted. So it's very important to immediately ask, what was your expectation? We want to understand where people are coming from. When they share what it is, oh, I was hoping you would do this, and I thought you were going to do that, and blah, blah, blah. Take what they're saying and respond to the expectation in realistic terms. Don't immediately say, yes, yes, yes. Some of you are very nice, somewhat codependent folk who have no problem saying yes, yes, yes to everything. So don't immediately jump in and promise stuff that you can't deliver. Just pause, listen to what the person is wanting from you, and then respond to the expectation in a realistic term. If John comes over and asks for something, super big, like extreme makeover or whatever, I'll say, in your dreams, it's not going to happen. But he would never ask that. What we need to do is respond to what we can respond to with folks and say, okay, you know what? I can get to that tomorrow, but I can't get to it today. Let people know what you can do. Or you can say, I can't do that, but this person can help you with that. So respond. It's very important that you clarify what the person wants, respond to it, and then remember, coach them and say, the next time you don't need to criticize me. Just tell me what you want. Assertiveness. Assertiveness is that beautiful language that we all need to learn. So let's talk a little bit about this, because this is going to help us in every area of our life, with communication with folks, solving problems, what I'm talking about this morning, when we need to forgive each other. We're always needing to know how to be assertive. And assertiveness is it's like learning a new, beautiful language. It's where we eliminate complaints and criticisms. Now, just pause for a moment and take that in. From this moment on, you no longer have to convey your needs or your wishes using complaints or criticisms. I'm telling you, this will revolutionize your family. Or as one lady said in one of my workshops, said, "What? I thought I was communicating my needs by complaining. How else should I be telling my people?" I said, hold on, I'm going to teach you how to be assertive, not critical. So the first step is to eliminate complaints and criticisms, and then think about what it is you want and put it in what I like to call CPR language: concrete, positive, realistic language. Say to the person, next time I would really like, if you're going to be, for example, late and not able to come home for dinner with the family, please call me. Let us know. So whatever it is that you are expressing that you want, you might say, I want a clean house and I wish everybody could help out. And let's develop a plan instead of complaining and saying, oh, this house is a mess and all of you are lazy, and the usual ways that we tend to do when we get ticked at each other. What you're going to do is stop, take out all complaints and criticisms, focus on what it is you would like, and put it in the CPR language. Don't just say, I want all of you to be nice. I want all of you to be respectful. That's not concrete enough. And everybody has a different way of being nice. So spell it out. Make it easy for folks to say, next time I would really like for you to not interrupt, but listen to me to the end. Or next time I would really appreciate if you're going to make a decision, to include me in the decision. So whatever it is that you're tempted to complain or criticize about with your kids, with your mates, with your friends, with your siblings, with anybody, with your workmates, just stop, do it the assertive way in the CPR language. I have to really start this discussion on how to solve problems with how to diffuse criticisms and how to use assertive language, because those are two very powerful tools and skills that we can use that will strip away a lot of unnecessary conflict. People don't like it when we complain, when we criticize. We don't like it when others complain and criticize. But now when we are criticized, we'll know not to criticize back, but instead to ask them, what were you expecting? And then to be able to respond to them in a realistic way. And then when it's our turn to ask for what we want with them, we use assertive language, in a respectful way, using that CPR language. So I just wanted to start off with those two reflections on those two very important skills. Any of you who are having some questions, just write them down. We'll have a few minutes at the end of this presentation to talk a little bit about what was helpful and some questions you have. So now let's get into how to actually solve a conflict. And here I just want to say a little reflection on, I want you to look at conflict in a new way. Don't look at conflict in a bad way. Look at it as an opportunity to build mutual understanding, to grow unity. You know, Jesus's greatest desire for us and his great call to unity in John 17:21 was, he said, my prayer is that all would be united, that all would be one. And we don't do unity very well, especially when we have conflicts with each other. So it's very important to know how to solve a conflict. But the first step might be, don't be afraid. You'll learn how to handle most conflicts this way. So look at it in a positive way, that it's there to help us build unity. So having said that, the person who has the issue, so I want you guys to know how to set this up right. Whoever has an issue with anybody in your family, so you might have an issue with your spouse. I'm going to use, for the purposes of simplicity, an example from a couple that I saw just recently. And I know some of you listening to this YouTube are not married, but you know, it's applicable to everybody. So I had this couple, and she was really, really angry at her husband. And so she, in the past, would nag him, would criticize him, would complain, and he would, of course, get very defensive. He wouldn't hear her. He'd just throw it back on her. So I said to her, Sally, let's call her Sally, I want you to define the conflict in behavioral terms. And this is where we identify what is the problem that we're having with a person. I want you to focus on the behavior, not the personality. Don't go off and criticize the person and say, well, you're so lazy, you never help me around the house, or, you know, you never think of my needs, you're so selfish. Just strip all of that out. Just focus on what is the problem. So for this woman, Sally, she was really upset that her husband was making unilateral decisions with their finances. And when he would, in this particular case, when he would spend money of a certain amount without consulting her, she got really afraid. And so she learned how to say to her husband, honey, when you spend over this amount of money without consulting with me, I feel really anxious. You know, we have 3 small children. You know, I have to balance the budget every month, and we always fall short if you make those unexpected expenses. And so she was finally able to say it in the right way. And then what I want you guys to do is, once you've got it into one sentence, what the conflict is and how it makes you feel, add to it the solution. Say, in a very concrete and positive way, say, you know, and she was able to do this. She says, you know, honey, next time I would really prefer that when you are going to spend, in this case, over $100 any time in the month, that you just let me know. That you let me know. So it's very important that the person who is coming with the issue, with the problem, that you define the conflict in behavioral terms, and then you bring a solution. If you don't bring a solution, you will be tempted to just complain and feel helpless. So be thinking about what it is you want that the other person could do. Now, the other person needs to do the UVA. And once you learn how to do this, then you guys can reverse roles. And one of you can set up the problem the way I just described, and the other can practice the UVA. So in this case, her husband, let's call him Sam. So it's Sally and Sam. So Sally expressed to Sam what the problem was for her. And she was able to strip away all the complaints and the criticisms, and so that it made it easier for him to understand her need and expectation. And so I said to Sam, I said, so Sam, what are you understanding Sally to say that the problem is for her, your behavior, and what she wants from you? And he immediately went into their history. He says, "Oh, I know what she means. She's just trying to control me. She's just trying to be my mom. She thinks I'm another kid. And, this is my money." And, and in this case, he was the main breadwinner, and he felt entitled. I make the money, I work long hours. This is my money, and I have the right to use it the way I want. So he had not really heard her, and he didn't understand her. So I turned to Sam and he said, "Hey, Sam, I was in the room. That's not what I heard." So I said to Sally, "Sally, say it again." So Sally turns to Sam and says, "Sam, when you spend over $100 in the month without consulting with me so we can make a joint decision, I feel really anxious because money is tight. We have 3 small children." And she shared it again. She goes, "And in the future, what I would really like is if you would just talk with me about that purchase and we make the decision together." So I turned to Sam and I said, "So Sam, what do you understand that Sally is wanting from you?" And he again threw up his hands and says, "Oh, yeah, I know what she's saying, but you know what? I can read between the lines. I know what she really means. I know what she's expecting." And I looked at Sam and I said, "Sam, I don't want you to read between the lines. I want you to read the lines." Because that's what we all do. That's what keeps these problems going. This misunderstanding between us is we know this person, we think we know what they mean, we interpret it, we assume stuff, and we read between the lines. Don't do that. Just stick with the request. And in this case, it took 3 times, and Sam finally did. And so I said to Sam, "So Sam, turn to Sally and just let her know what you're understanding her to ask of you." And so he turns to her and says, "So Sally, are you saying that if I spend more than $100 in the month without talking with you about it and consulting with you, that makes you really anxious and you're not sure if you can budget appropriately? Is that right?" And she looked at him and said, "Yes." Now that's when you can check off the U in the UVA, which stands for understanding. Don't go too hastily to the second step until you've checked in with somebody and said, "So let me get it right. Let me get it clear. Is this what you're wanting from me? That would really help you?" And she said, "Yes, Sam, that would really help." So then I said to Sam, "Okay, very good. Let's go to the second step, the V. Sam, now that you understand what she wants, and it's something that you could do, right? Do you value her expectation? Do you value her? Even if you disagree." And this is very hard for us sometimes because we have our way of doing things and it's not the other person's way of doing it. And that's what Sam said. He goes, "Oh, I understand what she wants from me. But you know what? I think it's hogwash. I think it's nonsense. I don't value it because I disagree. I look at it a different way. It's my money." And he kind of reiterated uh, his little argument. And I said, "I'm not asking you to agree with her, Sam. I'm asking you to value her." You see, in the UVA, to solve a problem, when the person comes to us with a problem, it's very important that we not get confused with, "I can only value somebody if I agree with them." We can disagree with folks all the time, but we can still respect them. We can still value them. We can still honor their request. And it's going to move us out of our comfort zone. And so I said to him, I said, "Sam, you don't have to agree with her. She has a different way of looking at it. And that's why you guys are having this conflict, but she's giving you a solution that's going to really, really help her with it. So do you value her request and what she wants from you?" It took a couple rounds, but finally Sam, he's a good guy, he turned to Sally and said, "So is this really that important to you?" And she looked at him and said, "Oh, yes, honey, you have no idea. I get so anxious when you just kind of do unilateral purchasing without checking in with me, and we can make that decision together. So yes, 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 it's really important to me." So he paused. I could see the wheels going. He looks at her and he says, "Okay, Sally, if it's important to you, it's important to me." That's it. That is a key turning point solving problems, is to understand each other and then to value, to not judge each other and to not say, "No, you got to do it my way." The whole point of solving a problem on the valuing step here is to learn how to value another person's request as long as it's realistic and it's doable. And, it's not a crazy request. I always tell people, obviously you've got to set boundaries. If somebody's asking you to do something illegal or immoral, obviously you're not going to do that. This is not about that. This is about responding in an intelligent, empathic way to the other person and to value their ideas. So I said to Sam, excellent, check off that second step. You've understood, you value in your heart and in your mind what she wants from you, even though you have a different perspective and you disagree. Now, very important, seal the deal. You gotta commit to a realistic and relevant behavioral change, the ACT. That's why we call it the UVA. We have to take all three of these steps to commit to a realistic and relevant behavioral change. You know what he was spending his money on? On his wheels, on his car. He loved his car and he was spending, lots of money, on new rims and I'm not a car person, but, new stuff for the car. And up until this point, he was still kind of acting like a single guy, saying, well, it's my money, I can use it my way. And this is where, when we solve problems the UVA way, what we're really doing is we're working on greater unity. How can we go from I and you to we? How can we hear each other, value each other, and commit to an action that will build greater unity? And so, bless him, he committed to an action. He says, okay, Sally, I'm going to do that. I will not, he had a habit of just, when he had some free time, go shopping for stuff for his car. He says, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to think about you. And if there's something I want or need during the month, I'm going to check with you on our budget together. So he committed to her to do that. And, that was beautiful. I could really see the beginning of their marriage really going to the next level. Now, you can work anything through the UVA, whatever the issue is. I just wanted to share about Sally and Sam because that's a very common problem that husbands and wives have, but everybody has with each other. One person does it their way and you would like them to do something different. And so you can run anything through the UVA. Also, it's very important to teach your children who are arguing, or maybe they're not sharing with each other, they're not listening to each other. Just teach them, first of all, through your role modeling yourself, because anything we want our kids to do, they have to first see in us that. So if we want them to understand each other, they have to have experienced that with us. And so, and to have seen that with us and the big people, the way we are navigating our conflicts by saying, okay, you've got the issue, okay, bring it to the table in the right way. Remember what that right way was? Without complaints and criticisms, focus on what it is that is the problem, the behavior, not the personality, and say, when you do this, as Sally did, she says, Sam, when you spend that without consulting with me, I feel really anxious. And then bring the solution in. And what would be really helpful in the future is this. The other person then, and you can teach your children how to do this, the other person needs to start the UVA. They need to understand, and instead of just saying, do you understand your sister? Or do you understand your brother? Because they could just say, yep, got it, but you don't know what they got. So you want to be able to ask the other person, tell your sister, tell the other what it is you're understanding they need from you and what they expect from you. And once you have that, you can then move to the value statement and say, now valuing, it's very simple to value somebody. It means removing judgment and just saying in your own words, like Sam did. I just thought it was so beautiful the way he said, is it really important to you? And she said, yes. And he said, okay, if it's important to you, it's important to me. I love that. You can say that too, and you can teach the others how to do this too in their own words, and then do it. Come up with a game plan to say whatever the issue was, how you can respond to that. That UVA approach in solving most of our conflicts is powerful because our temptation is to disagree and to judge with each other. I kind of call it the fight, flight, or freeze response. And if you have access to the little reflection sheet that I sent out to y'all, and you can be getting that on the St. Simon website, I begin with most conflicts arise out of differences in the way that we think, we feel, or that we want to do things. And the common barriers to solving a problem are we either fight, flight, or freeze. These are just things we do as humans with each other. If we fight, a fight response would be we start blaming the other person or we start shaming them. Say, well, it's your problem, and if you've got an issue with it, it's your issue. It's not my problem, and we just come out fighting, and that's a barrier. So we want to be able to get our fighting impulses, kind of subdue them, so we can be focusing on the UVA. Some people, though, get into a flight response where they're so afraid of conflict that they let the fear of the conflict drive them to just avoid the conflict. And they may isolate from the other. They may just, walk away or emotionally shut down. Or they just might make empty promises, say, okay, I'll do this, but it's empty. They're just saying it to appease the other. So we don't want to let our fear make us just make these empty promises because we're so afraid of the conflict. So fight the urge to fight, to flight. And then another barrier is when we just freeze. And sometimes people have come from such high conflict backgrounds that any hint of a conflict just makes them freeze like a deer in the headlights. And they immediately start to feel helpless, hopeless, and then they just play the victim, play the doormat. So we don't want to give in to those urges. I think we all have those impulses in us, depending on also on the conflict that we're having with the person, but just watch that you don't go into fight, flight, or freeze, and instead go into the UVA approach. So I just wanted to make mention of that. And then I've got some questions there on how you can share examples of how you use assertive language to describe a conflict, and how you can then, as the listener, do the understand, the V, the value, and the commitment to an action. So I really encourage you, work that little worksheet and practice it. Practice makes progress. It's not about perfection. Some verses that always come to my mind and my heart when I'm talking about conflicts, really about anything, but specifically with conflicts, sometimes we might think, oh, I just can't do this, it's just beyond me. And I just want us all to remember what St. Paul says in Romans 5:5. Beautiful verse, memorize it, put it on a mug, needle pointed on a pillow, have it on a wall plaque. Romans 5:5, the love of God has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. In other words, we can love even if we're angry at somebody. We have to maintain control of our anger, or if we're afraid, we have to manage our anxiety, or if we get discouraged or sad, we have to we have to make sure that our emotions are not getting the best of us, to remember that, what, I can still love because the Holy Spirit is in me. God wants unity. And look in the second verse, John 17:21, where Jesus says, my prayer is that all may be one. That was his greatest desire, why he came, was incarnated, and why he died on the cross and rose again for us, to bring us back in unity in the Trinity. But also what he wanted was that we build unity with each other. And in conflict, this is when we can really get stubborn, really separate, and refuse to do it. So I want us to be quicker at developing assertive language, not judgmental, critical language, to be able to do the UVA, set up the problem the right way. And obviously, as y'all know, anybody who listens to us knows that this is one of a handful of important skills that we need to be learning. And so I encourage all of you, married or not, just get our book, Thriving Marriages. We also have some really cool talks to help us develop these 5 absolutely core interpersonal skills of empathy, assertiveness, communication, how to solve problems, and how to forgive. Today, I'm talking about assertiveness, a little bit on empathy, but really conflict resolution. And in my previous talk, I talked about how to boost our communication. And I have another talk with y'all on how to forgive and reconcile. So these are the 5 core skills. So I encourage all of you to keep working on them. And these, we're better in some of these than with others. But today in conflict resolution, I think we all need to take the next step to learn how to do the UVA. So I wanted to make the talk really tight and practical, because I also want to open it up to what was most helpful to y'all. So right now we've got some time to have some Q&A time, and I want to open it up to any of you that have a question, but also what was helpful. We talked about how to diffuse and disarm criticism. How many of us need to do that? I think all of us. We need to know, instead of getting defensive at somebody who criticizes us, we need to train ourselves to say, what was your expectation? And to then respond in a realistic way. So that may have touched your heart this morning. Maybe the other part about having that new language of assertiveness, just, stripping away complaints and criticisms, and to be able to focus on what it is you would like to tell the other person on how you want to be treated. Maybe that spoke to you, and I think it speaks to all of us. We could all say, wow, I am too prone to criticize and complain. I need to really learn how to delete that, and then share with the person in an invitational way, not in a bossy way, but in an invitational way, what it is I would like from them. And then we move into the UVA. How many of us need to work on our understanding? Yes. On our valuing each other, even when we disagree, and then following through and committing to an action. I think that speaks to all of us, but I want to hear from you guys. So let's maybe open up to anybody who has a question.
Sounds good. Claire, even is there a way we can see Claire's face, or?
Oh, yes. Claire, can you undo the sharing?
Yes, I can do that.
Oh, there you go. That'll be great. Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, I want to hear from some of you. Any questions that you have? What was most helpful? Let's hear from a couple of y'all.
What was most helpful? Kristen.
Thank you for that. Was a great.
And there's a few questions that have come in. One was, okay, how does one manage a pattern of empty promises? So that's a good question. So is the person asking that question about themselves, that they tend to make empty promises? That's from Kay. Kay, are you asking on behalf of yourself?
I think that's a chat that came from someone in Zoom, right?
Oh, okay. Okay, well, it's a good question. Because sometimes if we get really anxious, okay, the other person might just say, yeah, yes. So be aware of who you're working with, and don't come on too strong and then criticize them and say, oh, you're just making an empty promise. Just pause and make sure, first of all, that they understand what it is you want, and ask them if they haven't shared with you yet. If they've just said, yeah, I got it. Okay, I'll just do it. Don't get defensive, stay calm, and just make sure between the two of you that you've made yourself clear and that you're inviting them to a realistic change. And ask them, say, can you do it? And when can you do it? you can just check in with each other. If you say, I want this to happen. One woman said she was getting so frustrated with her husband because he was a really responsible, good worker, but what she really wanted was to have some time to talk with him. And he didn't really think that was necessary. And so she was able to finally share it in the right way and say, if we can work together and put the kids down to bed and have, a little bit of hot tea or a glass of wine, in the evening, just have some 15-20-minute time to just share the meaning of our day. It's kind of what I covered in the communication talk. Some of you might want to access and listen to that again. But she was making a realistic and possible request. And I had to work with her on that because initially she was so frustrated at him never sharing. She was really quite critical and would say, I need an hour with you. And I looked at her and I said, really? I don't think that's very realistic. Do you? And she turned to her husband and he goes, no way, I don't have time. And so she was able to say, well, could we have a little bit of time? And they settled on 15 minutes. So that's all to say that if the person makes quick and empty promises, just pause, make sure it's realistic and that the person understands and can actually do it. Good question. Somebody else?
Claire, Kristen has her hand up. Kristen, go ahead.
I was saying that, thank you for your presentation. That was great. I think the thing that stuck with me most that maybe I'm not necessarily practicing well yet is the disarming criticism, where you're hearing it and then it's kind of like, okay, immediately my brain is churning, or I'm taking it all in and my brain is churning about, first trying to go back and find out when that actually happened, or if it actually happened, if I disbelieve it, but also just be able to say, okay, well, I'll give you a chance to have the floor. What was your expectation? And to hear it, and maybe now, okay, well, this is how this person perceived it, or maybe this is how it came across, and maybe wasn't my intention, because sometimes it could be resolved right there to say, hey, look, that's not even what I meant, and I apologize that it came off that way. But I like that was defined, and
I call it diffuse and disarm the incoming missile.
Yes.
Like the criticism is coming in like a missile, and our tendency is to grab it and say, oh yeah, well, let me tell you something. And then we launch the missile back at them. So it's very important when we are criticized to just pause. You got to really work on your emotional resilience. I kind of call this resilience. We got to manage our emotions. And the best way to do it is stop judging, stop being defensive, and become curious and ask the person, so what were you expecting? And they'll say whatever they were expecting. And then you can say, you can respond to it. Maybe the person was expecting something and they never shared it with you. And you can say, well, that's good to know. You had not shared that with me, and it would be helpful the next time. You don't need to criticize me, just tell me. Just tell me. And most people will say, oh yeah, you're right, I'm so sorry, I thought I did, but I got busy, blah, 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 blah. Most people, when you put it up that way, they'll be able to work with you. There'll be a few who are really stubborn and really resentful, and they'll say things like, well, you should just know. And if you don't know, then you don't love me. And sometimes people will say that to each other and say, why do I have to spell it out? If you loved me, you should just know. And I tell the person who says that, don't make people mind read. That's putting way too much on the person. Just be simpler. Just tell people what you want. And sometimes in marriage, we work a lot with couples. And so as one woman said to her husband, yeah, but he should just know, he's been married to me long enough. He should just know. If he loved me, he should just know. I said, don't do that. That's bad. Tell him. We need to update our records on each other, what we want. Yeah. Criticism is a biggie, and that will keep festering in the wound, so that when our genuine differences come in, if we don't know what to do and how to transform criticism and then put in place assertive language, see what assertive language does? It's not your right to be bossy and to give somebody a piece of your mind. Assertiveness is a beautiful way to let somebody know what it is you want and invite them. Don't hit them over the head and say, you better do it or else. Be invitational. That's what I call assertiveness. If we don't do it that way, then you've got to call it what it is. It's threatening the person, being bossy, but it's not being assertive. Okay,
I have a question. I have a daughter who finds difficulty in being assertive. Like she feels like, I think she doesn't trust herself or doesn't value herself enough. I feel like in order to become assertive, you gotta know your own value and dignity. And how do I increase that in her? How can I increase someone's belief in herself and trusting in herself?
oh, and you're referring to your daughter?
Yes.
Okay, well, just say assertiveness is a new language. We don't complain, we don't criticize, we don't, throw our hands up and say, you should just know. What we're doing is we're thinking through what it is I would like, what would be helpful for the other person to know. And that's a really nice way to help our kids and our teens and each other how to be assertive is I want you to be thinking about how can you help somebody else understand what you need. And that's really putting it in a positive way. And then you can say, oh, okay, well, I can help them understand what I need by being maybe a little bit more clear and say, I really like this and not that. And you can role play with your daughter, Rose, too. You can say, okay, what would be most helpful to you? Because sometimes people maybe don't know what they want. They do know what they want, but they don't know how to say what they want. Then you can just say, well, what would be most helpful? And you can kind of problem solve through it with them. It's about helping somebody understand what you want and then checking in to say, can you do that? Remember that CPR language? Make it concrete, positive, and realistic. Don't just say, I just want you to be nicer. Well, what does that mean? So let's not use vague terms. Just say, it would be really helpful to me if you would, and then state the thing that you want that person to attend to. Assertiveness is beautiful and it needs to be followed by empathy. In the last talk, I talk about empathy is learning to love somebody else the way they want to be loved. And assertiveness is helping them understand what we need to be loved. And do empathy first and then assertiveness. There are some people who are low in empathy. They have no problem being assertive and telling people what they want. And they might have to work on raising their empathy to check in with other people. Other people are very high empathy. They're always being very nice and saying, hey, how can I help you? And they're sacrificing their own need to share what they need. And if we are not assertiveness, we don't let people know what is helpful to us. We collude in missing that opportunity to let them know what would be helpful to us. So, and that might set up a dynamic of feeling used and feeling unappreciated. Well, maybe someone is feeling unappreciated because they haven't been assertive. They haven't shared with the other person what it is they would like. So when we start to feel, upset and critical, just stop and say, what do I need to do with this person? Do I need to raise my empathy a little bit? Do I need to raise my assertiveness a little bit? And then when we have a problem, how to go in on that UVA. Good question. Let's have somebody else share. What was most helpful? Or a question that you have. I'm checking on the chat. Anybody else? Yep, I see that raised hand.
Yeah, I just was saying that in my family, we tend to be very emotional. And so sometimes this assumes that somebody is coming at you, not in an aggressive way. So quite often, at least in my family, somebody will be really hot and angry. And how do you diffuse that? Because before you diffuse that, you can't have a rational discussion.
Right.
And it's worked them before because they can intimidate the person.
Right. Well, obviously, that opens up that whole area. If somebody has very poor impulse control and they start yelling and they come in loaded for bear, and, some people go from 0 to 60 in 1 nanosecond, they got to work on their cool it off to, because when we get too emotional, we can't think straight. Our adrenaline is pumping and we just have to calm down before we can even think straight, let alone talk straight. So if this person is just prone to he's a yeller or she can't control her temper very well, they need a timeout. And I think that could be best done by people, not engaging in a fight, flight, or freezing kind of way. So if that pushes any of your fight buttons where you come, that's very fruitless. Don't fight with a fighter, and don't immediately go into the empty promises, and don't just freeze. Take a time out yourself, and obviously if it gets out of hand, then there have to be stronger measures, because some people have physiological problems. If there's addiction, they've been drinking, or if there's anything else, at the party, they've been drinking a little too much, and then they lose, the first thing that you lose when you're drinking too much is good common sense. So you have to kind of know where you're at and with whom you're at, and it's okay to take a break.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
Yeah, because there's always going to be somebody, in any group of 4 people, I call them the 25 percenters. There's always going to be a really difficult person. Just count it off in your family, count it off in your work environment, just count it off. Wherever 4 are gathered, there's going to be one really difficult person. And so you've got to be using these skills with skill with that really difficult person. Yeah. Okay, another reflection, another thought, another question before we end this brief but super fruitful hour.
It is so good, Claire, that I hope we get a chance to practice it. It feels like I need to practice it and be coached.
Yes.
So I know our people are feeling that way, that maybe next week, we can do a practice session where we can come up with some scenarios of conflict and we can all help each other out.
And then go through the reflection sheet, where you're working through so that you really, you can take turns, one of you can have the issue and set up the issue in the right way. And the other person can be practicing the UVA, and then you can go through the steps to resolve that conflict. When we do it the right way, most of our conflicts can be resolved in about 15 minutes. Now, I know a lot of people go, what? We've been going around and around the mulberry bush on this one. And I said, yeah, because you've been criticizing each other and then defending each other. But when you strip out complaints and criticisms, it's like all that static, suddenly we can hear each other. So I want you to be thinking from a faith perspective also, when Jesus says, my greatest prayer is that all may be one. What we need to do is put on the mind of Christ so that we're learning how to listen to each other. So that UVA will help us. Good, I'm glad. Yay.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. I'll see you guys later. Adios.